Howdy, folks. Happy Monday. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. Eck will be back. We have a trade in the NHL and some interesting goings on with a GM basically giving a guarantee that he's not going to fire a coach and a few other things.
At this time.
At this time. Well, let's start with the NFL. And Russ, I made it painfully clear, I'm not as big of an NFL fan as I used to be. But when it comes to playoffs, I'm gonna be an interested spectator.
Yeah, sure, we're gonna tune in.
Yeah, and I was up in Toronto covering the Leafs Bruins game, which we'll get to talk about a little later on, and watching sort of when I got the chance the games. And I have to say, and you said it first, but I agree with it. Other than the Saints-Eagles game, there really wasn't any drama in any of these games. Not even the Cowboys got to within, what was it? It was within 8, right? It was with 30-22. But really, I mean, it wasn't close for most of the game. The Patriots opened up a can of whoop ass on the Chargers, and Kansas City Indy was not even close either. So
it right them almost out of the gate. It was embarrassing for Indy.
The NFL can't be happy for that.
No, I mean, all these games except for the Eagles game laid an egg. But I have to talk about the Eagles game for a sec because I'm in that part of the world. And the day before, I had put out a tweet that I had not seen really any members of the media on radio. Could have been in print. I didn't look for print. But on radio, I was seeing almost no representation of the Saints. Like, I get that I live in Philadelphia, but if you don't say that Drew Brees is great and point out that he's probably the second best quarterback in the league this year, and you don't mention Michael Johnson, who is the best receiver in
Thomas,
the best receiver in the league this year. Alvin Kamara certainly got a little mention, but all of this got a little mention. The Saints defense got no mention. And at the end of the day, they were the better team. You could always talk about, and I even had to tell my dad this because he's become an Eagles fan. You could always talk about that missed pass but what's funny about a missed pass is it didn't mean that it was going to be a touchdown. It wasn't Jackie Smith in the end zone. And that's all it was part of a drive that would have gotten a first down, but there's no guarantee of points there.
It's interesting that you bring that up because and I'll translate it to hockey. And everybody thinks that the Sabres would have won the cup if it hadn't been for Brett Hull's no goal.
Right.
It was game 6. It was triple overtime. There's no guarantee that they even win that game.
Yeah.
And then I think it would have gone back to Dallas for game 7. So there's no guarantee. I mean, the injustice was there.
Yeah.
But you cannot assume they're going to march down the field and Nick Foles is going to throw a touchdown. And I mean, I understand the fan mentality there, but that's, I mean,
and if you want to play that game, if the Saints made their field goal, the Eagles wouldn't even have had a chance. They'd have been down 9.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't even have had a chance. But anyhow, I feel bad for Jeffries. I did. Like, it's a ball that went through his hands. He usually catches everything. Sure. It didn't happen, right? But you know what? I had mentioned in the Bears game that the Bears went downfield. I wrote march downfield. I stand by it. And they got themselves in field goal range, and it didn't happen, right? So they lost the playoffs. Well, guess what? The Eagles still had a chance to stop the Saints and get the ball back, and then Kamara had a 10-yard run, and it was game over. Had they stopped that run, they would have gotten the ball back, and Nick Foles would have had a chance. So my basic premise is the Eagles' defense gets tired. Why did they get tired? Sometimes they don't. It's really weird. They decided to go with a strategy of not rushing Drew Brees. So in the first half, they didn't blitz him once. They went with just 4 guys, and the Saints line handled that well. Now he only had 10 points in the first half, so they thought they were doing the right thing. But guess what? This is Drew Brees. They're gonna make adjustments, and they never really got in his kitchen. They did knock him a few times, but they made it a little bit easier for Drew Brees than probably we all thought it would be. So
yeah. So now we have the unusual NFC and AFC championship game because it's 1-2 versus 1-2.
Right.
And we'll talk about this later in the week, but I have to say, I think the LA New Orleans matchup is intriguing. I'm not so sure about Kansas City, New England.
No,
although
I think it's intriguing. I can come up with a reason. But real quickly, Adam Gase was just had a press conference to be the head coach. You know, he's new head coach of the Jets. His first press conference as head coach. It was literally a 20-minute orchestrated session, and the media never asked general manager Mike McCagnon a question. I can't even imagine a head coach that gets hired with a franchise quarterback and no one has a question for the GM and the GM doesn't make a statement. The owner, Chris Johnson, even went so far as to say, because he never made an edict that the Jets should have to make the playoffs when he took over the team from Woody with Todd Bowles there, even going into this year, he never made that as an edict. So they asked him, what about making the playoffs? He said he will never make that an edict on the team. And I'm just thinking, why are we even in sports then if that's the message being sent?
Yeah. So, you know what? There are times when your owners can come out and say, we understand where we are in the cycle of stuff and things like that. But you know what? These guys didn't get successful for having no drive. The expectation is to be the best whenever you can be, and the goal should always be to make the playoffs.
Even if you talk about the playoffs, and he won't demand it.
You don't have a snowball's chance, and you know where.
And this
still your goal, because stranger things can happen. And
the most ridiculous thing about that, and then we'll get started, is the fact that not only, I mean, does it make it appear that the GM wasn't on board with hiring the coach? Right. They have $100 million in salary cap space, and what the general manager does in the next 3 or 4 months in terms of building up that team, just like Buffalo has like 80-something million. Yeah. That's going to be the most important thing, almost more important than the coach. So how in hell do they not ask one question of the general manager?
Now, the coach did talk about winning a division. He didn't say what year. So, you know, I don't know what year he's hoping to win the division, but he did talk about if you could win the division, like almost as if, you know, if this happens, this is what you do. Not like we're going to challenge for the division. Not like with Sam Darnold, we hope to win the division. No, it was just like, well, yeah, you hope to win the division, and then if you get in the tournament, but it's like, well, how are we going to do it? What players are we going to get? What direction is this team going in? None of those questions were answered, and it's just, as a fan, if you watch the press conference, you just get mad. And I'm surprised there's probably a lot of broken monitors around New York.
And let me just say this quickly, and then we'll start. I made the mistake of, because I use Twitter an awful lot on my computer, I made the mistake of clicking the button on my Twitter saying, we have a new version of Twitter. And the new version of Twitter has slowed down my computer to the point that it locks up every time I use it. So
really?
If anybody
I'm not having this problem, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe you have a newer.
Do you use the web one, or do you use an app?
I use the web one.
Oh,
so
the app's terrible.
I'm using the web one. I'm using an iMac that's like 3 years old.
Yeah, I mean, my MacBook Pro is about 4 or 5 years old, and it shouldn't. You know, the other one operated no problem. All of a sudden, this new version, where like all the trending things are on the right side instead of the left. You know, it's a new setup, but not really that new. All I know is like my computer sort of locks up, and I get the little kaleidoscope spinning when I try to go from one thing to another. So yeah, the pinwheel. So anyway, all right. So if anybody knows how you can get back to the old version, if at all possible, you know, send me a message or whatever on Twitter. Maybe I'll be able to open it up next year. Anyway, hello Hockey World. Today is Monday, January 14th, 2019.
I'm Peter Tessier in Winnipeg.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with the trade that happened today. It's not a major deal, but we can tie it into the downturn of the Anaheim Ducks, which is getting to the point here where a lot of people, I mean, I know a lot of people in the analytics community are sort of rubbing their hands with glee, waiting for Randy Carlyle to be fired. I sort of like Randy Carlyle. I mean, I don't think he was at fault for what was going on in Toronto. I think that, his failings there were more the failings of the roster than the failings of him. But they're having a difficult year right now. John Gibson's been standing on his head, and that's the only reason they're anywhere close to being a playoff spot. And they've had some injury problems. But the deal that they made today was a 1-for-1, trading longtime Duck former Oiler, and Andrew Cogliano to the Dallas Stars for Devin Shore. It's a 1-for-1 deal. Both, Cogliano has played more. I don't know if he's played more wing than center for them, but I know he can play both.
He can play both.
Yeah, Shore's playing center, and Shore signed a 2-year bridge deal, so he's making in the 2.2 range, and Cogliano is making over $3 million. Both have term left in their contracts. Russ, what did you think of this deal?
I give the edge to Dallas. I think Anaheim made this deal to shake up the locker room because Cogliano is a very popular player there, and since they didn't fire the coach and won't fire the coach, since Bob Murray made that plainly obvious, I think this was the attempt by Murray to spark the team. But while he was sparking the team, he lost a little talent there because while Devin Shore is a completely decent center with decent NHL speed, Cogliano, even at his age, has very good speed and still is a terrific penalty killer and still has a lot of playoff experience. And end of the day, if Dallas makes the playoffs, this was an upgrade for them.
Yeah.
Peter?
So I saw a tweet that said, I can't remember who said it, I wish I'd give him credit, but it's like Dallas so Anaheim traded older Cogliano for younger Cogliano. I don't know if that's entirely right. I'm not super familiar with Shore, but Cogliano is the exact kind of guy the Oilers could use. Sorry, just had to do that. But
we'll get to the Oilers, believe me.
Cogliano, I saw the game last night. Cogliano had a good game. He he got the Ducks the lead on a nice little play, bit of a misread by Scheifele behind the net, but he got the Ducks the lead, came out and around, bit of a softie by Hellebuck, and he's an effective player. I think you'll find a lot of love in regards to Randy Carlyle, because we're on the subject, Mike. You'll find a lot of love and time for him in Winnipeg because he coached the Moose here before he went on to the Ducks, and he has a history here with the franchise of the Jets, and there's a fondness for him here. I think Randy Carlyle's heart and head is in the right place to trying to do things. I just think his methodologies are maybe have moved beyond where the game is at right now. Sure. I don't think Anaheim's roster is an effectively optimized roster for what he's trying to do either, given where they are in the age curve and stuff. But that's a weird move to come out and put this kind of back on the players in some regard with the quote from Murray, and then make this trade today. I don't know what that says to the players, but I don't know if it says I don't think it says the right thing.
Well, let's just say this. I mean, if there's a mindset there that, they want that the players thought that they could maybe get rid of Carlisle by, I'm not saying this. I'm not saying that they're undercutting or sabotaging on purpose. But, sometimes psychologically, like, okay, if we lose a couple more games, we can get rid of this guy. And, but I don't think that's the case. And maybe Murray just illustrated that by, okay, he's staying and we're going to shake things up. We expect more out of you. I also think, and I said this to you, Russ, this morning, I also think that the sort of vote of confidence, although it's not a guarantee that later on, if they lose another 10 in a row, that they won't fire him, I think it's also a reflection of the fact that right now, other than Alain Vigneault and Joel Quenneville, who I don't think Joel Quenneville is going to take a job midseason, because if he was, he may have taken one already. They don't feel that there is a candidate out there that can switch things around. And
so Dallas Aikens can't switch things around.
Well, and that's the thing. Dallas Aikens may be the heir apparent there. They gave him an extension. He's coaching their AHL team in San Diego, but maybe they don't want to put him into a situation like Chicago put Jeremy Colleton in, where they fire a guy who won a Stanley Cup there, and they bring in a guy whose only NHL experience was the cluster F that was the Edmonton Oilers, and maybe he contributed to that. He was a young coach at that time. I think that, if they do let go Carlisle at the end of this year, or even, maybe during the season, I think they're going to let him stay for the rest of the year, that Eakins will be the guy.
You know how you solve that, though, Mike? You solve that by giving Aikens a contract, and you don't make him an interim.
They already gave him a contract.
Huh?
They already gave him a contract.
No, but I mean, he's got an AHL contract.
Right.
You give him an NHL head coaching contract, one that is at least 3 to 4 years, and nobody talks about it, and you say, Dallas, we're starting the clock a little early. This year is no reflection on you. You tell them this behind the scenes, but see what you can do with the team, because right now we're going nowhere.
Yeah, I mean,
but they don't feel that way about him, Mike. That's what I'm telling you.
Well, maybe they don't think it's beneficial to him to put him in a situation where this team is floundering right now. But if
they won't be better next year, if he takes over next year, how are they going to be better?
Well, I mean, you're going to have an off season of Murray probably implementing changes like he just started to do today. I mean, he traded Cogliano, who's been there for 5 or 6 years.
They're close today. Next year, they may be nowhere near close. That's my basic point.
Right. I mean, it's completely possible that, I mean, I think Murray, and I've heard people like Elliot Friedman from Hockey Night in Canada talk about Bob Murray and say it's against Bob Murray's, ethic to really fire a coach in midseason unless he has any other option. And he did it once with Carlisle back and it was explained that Bruce Boudreau got fired from Washington and they needed a change there. And they thought Boudreau was a different type of, more upbeat, more offensive minded. And they said, okay, we can't pass this up. We don't know, whether we'll get a chance to hire him next year. Somebody may gobble him up. So they did that.
Well, ask Eck what he thinks.
I was just going to say, it's funny when you think of Boudreau as like a more upbeat character. Sorry, it kind of makes me laugh a little bit.
Well, then Krusty. Remember Randy Carlisle's nickname in Anaheim was Krusty Carlisle.
You're not exactly. I mean, the competition is pretty stark there. So I agree with that completely. So what I think about the Cogliano trade, I think you're talking guess.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I've always been a Cogliano fan. And it's funny because he just is one of those players who, was in that time when Edmonton was getting players that just were disappointing them, like Sam Gagner, Cogliano. I put them together kind of in the same world, but they were more talented than you would think, but they were just turned out to be disappointments. And, so I've always found, and one of the things about Cogliano that's crazy, right, is his Iron Man status, right? Like he just never misses a game.
Well, until he got suspended, and then
that suspension, he could be talking about setting records. I mean, that's the crazy thing about that. And that's kind of why some people were really, it sucked. It was a sucky way to have that streak end.
Sure.
But I think, and I'm also a Jim Nill fan. Like I'm gonna go with Jim Nill here. Is really if I'm going to go between Murray and Nill, I'm going to go with Nill every time. Nothing against Bob Murray, but I think that I'm going to look at Jim Nill and say Jim Nill knows something about this. Right?
I think this was a deal. I think this was a deal that I mean, for both sides. For Anaheim, it was clearly shake-up time because of the slump that they've had, and for Dallas, I mean, Dallas after. The whole Jim Lights, Ben Sagan thing. They've actually played better. They're at 60 points right now. 50 points right now. 8 points behind Nashville, but they're in third place in the Central. And I mean, I think Cogliano helps them in terms of roster depth, in terms of forwards. And if they can get more healthy, if they can get Mathot back, that'll help their defense. I don't know. He's barely played this year.
Everybody who's ever played with Cogliano loves him too. Like that's the other thing. You'll talk to players and they'll all just say the same thing about him.
Right.
And I think that a big part of Dallas has to be looked at as the culture and how they haven't achieved enough in the playoffs. And then when you're talking about the stuff with Sagan and Ben, it was obviously. I mean, Jim Nill was obviously upset about the whole thing too. He went on the radio and said, I didn't appreciate the words he was using, but he understand the sentiment of it. But at the same time, it's not like they were having horrible seasons. And I think really. Yeah,
but Nill made it clear that he signed off on it, Rack. He did.
Yeah.
So did ownership. It was the way it was couched. It was the way.
That's all it was. It was all just about semantics.
Right.
We got the message. The message was real.
Right.
And Montgomery's been putting that message out there. He put it out there again yesterday. This team is not performing the way it should.
And I think that has a lot to do with culture in Dallas. Like I think that,
that's what he's trying to change. You're right.
And you're trying to put, so when you go to some of these southern cities, like Dallas, obviously Atlanta, Nashville was this way you get this, Nashville's done a really good job at not being that way because they've had Barry Trotz, but I've seen in Florida, and you see in these other cities, because the media does not really know hockey all that well sometimes. And because there's a lot of people, I mean, that's changed recently, but early on, there's this culture of like, okay, the Stars will never be the Cowboys, or and they'll never have to. I mean, obviously they're not the Mavericks. The Stars are way down the pecking order, and the media's not paying attention to them. So you almost have to have something like this happen to like get the team themselves to realize that this is serious business we're talking about here. Like, we're not just paying you all this money to put a team together that might be fun for a few people in Dallas to enjoy. It's not
right.
You know what I mean by that? It's kind of hard to explain, but
I know what you're saying, but it's a little crazy that it's gotten to that. I mean, I know a lot of passionate Stars fans. I know it's not everybody.
Yeah, no, they exist. No question about it.
But that's the thing. It's if the players don't play with the same passion as the fans, I don't get it. Now, I will tell you this.
Yeah.
In the game against Philly, when they were just listless for 2 periods on the road.
Right.
Apparently, that was standard operating procedure for this year. Like, everybody's like, that's how they play on the road.
When you came into Philly, you're like, as bad as the Flyers are playing, you're pretty astonishing to see the Dallas Stars play that way. And it's almost like, another city I saw this in, honestly, I'll be frank, was San Jose for a long time. Like this whole like concept of like, it's usually nice there. It's warm. Players arrive with like flip-flops on.
Laid back Northern California.
Yeah, I remember Joe Thornton in flip flops, walking into the arena, and all that stuff with his stick, he had a hockey stick and flip flops on. And then I went back to his pool in between the morning skate.
They're selling hummus instead of hot dogs at the arena.
And it is so nice in Arizona. These places are so beautiful to live in, and it's almost hard to like. There's a difference. It's easy to get an urgency.
So is Tampa. In Tampa, they want to beat the crap out of you.
No, I know. But it's easier to get an urgency among athletes in general when you're in Winnipeg, when it's like 5 degrees outside, and
because you walk into the arena mad because it's like
you just have this thing where
everything else, the weather is miserable. You just got out of the car, it's freezing. You're going into the rink. You want to beat up somebody.
Yeah, you might as well win if you're going through all this trouble. Right. It's like you're
gonna falling out.
Right. Right. I mean, it's like, to me, it's like, you're going to the ice rink to get warm. That's what you're talking about in Winnipeg. So it's like, to me, there is, and I think I've always sensed that Dallas has had that. The only time they was when Hitch was there. I remember what Hitch had to do. Remember, people forget like how much hell Hitch gave Modano, how much hell Hitch gave Brett Hull.
I don't know if he had to give Modano that much hell. I don't think he had to push Modano that hard.
Don't you remember the fights those guys had?
Yeah, but that's not because he was necessarily pushing them. That's because Hitch can be an idiot, too.
Well, no. Madonna, to this day, will credit Hitchcock.
Hitch knows that. Hitch would agree with that. He says things sometimes for effect.
Yeah, he does. Yeah. But it needed to be said because it needed to be said. That's just the reality of it.
No,
like his ongoing feud with Lindy Ruff. That was all for effect.
Hitch says that. But no, Madonna. I mean, I remember when Madonna got put in the Hall of Fame, and I remember watching the interview with him and him going off on like, man, there were some times when I was so angry at Ken Hitchcock. He's like, but I can tell you right now that if Ken Hitchcock hadn't done all that stuff, I wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame right now.
Well, because he won a cup, right? But if he didn't win a cup, he wouldn't have used. It would be a different speech. Trust me.
Yeah, that's like the line about Scotty Bowman. We hated him for 364 days, and the day we loved him was when we won the cup.
But my point is, I mean, it's just like you have to have that. So what happened with Seguin and now Cogliano brings in like an old school hockey mentality in a way. Like he is definitely that. He is not, Yeah,
he's a hard worker, but he's also fast. He's also used to making the playoffs at this point. Right. So he will have some expectations.
He's got a sense of humor about him, like that he like won't give players can't get away with stuff around him.
Yeah.
He's got like, one of those hockey type attitudes that you need. And I think that when you have a Seguin and you have a Ben in the room like that, you definitely have. I mean, Ben is. I mean,
Spets is there too. Spets has been through the wars, but you know what?
Too, though. I mean, you're talking about like Spets used to get blamed all the time in Ottawa for not taking things seriously enough.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
And in Seguin, you have a guy who everybody thinks, oh, he's a privileged guy. And in Ben, you have like your prototypical Canadian who, if I'm not playing well, I'm going to shut up and not say a word.
No. Hold on. In the post game of the Flyers lost, Jamie Benn ripped his team. He came out and said, look, this is not a good game. we're a team that prides ourselves on getting second effort shots, and we didn't do that. And when we look back on the videotape, we're not going to be happy about that. So he does not.
That's good to hear, because I mean, I have not always. I mean, and that's, you know, Ben, has obviously matured and is what he is there too. But I think it's a good trade. I think it's a good trade. It'll be interesting to see.
But who do you think? Do you think anybody got an edge? I think Dallas got an edge. I do.
I think Dallas gets the edge. Yeah, just because you're getting
a playoff performer, and he's not a big time playoff performer, but he's used to it.
But this is the kind of trade that we talk about after like a team wins the Stanley Cup, and like, that getting Cogliano, that was huge. You know, you can feel that. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of the Hartman trade, that Nashville pulled off last year, which,
Well, I mean, Hartman was still, on his entry level or.
Oh yeah, no, he was on his entry level, but he was way better than people realized.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, Nashville paid a decent price for him. I mean, you got to remember the contributing factor to that deal was the fact that Chicago is always in cap trouble and they weren't going to be able to pay Hartman.
Right. And remember, Hartman was really upset about that trade.
Yeah,
he did not want to go to Nashville. He was like he loved it in Chicago. He was from Chicago, right? Wasn't he? Isn't he from Chicago?
Wait, who are you talking about?
Hartman.
Ryan Hartman.
No, he's not from Chicago. He's an American, but he's from Michigan, I believe.
I thought the Blackhawks. I thought the Blackhawks were his favorite team growing up, or something like that.
But I think he's from Michigan.
So, but at the end of the day, he also. I can't help but think that Dallas wins in this trade, and
South Carolina actually.
Okay, all right, and then Anaheim just ends up. That's interesting. He's from South Carolina.
One last thing about Dallas, though.
Yeah, go ahead.
After watching that game, and now after a trade like this, don't be shocked if Valeri Nichushkin just gets the bench. He's got 7 points in 36 games. He's been awful.
He was terrible against Philly.
He's never. I don't think he's come back yet. You know what I'm saying? He went to the KHL and he's never come back. It's shocking because the guy's got a lot of natural talent. I mean, that's somebody probably they end up moving. just to see if they can get something.
He had a ton of natural talent, but he was remember he was he was one of the first YouTube stars in
but he had a great rookie year and then he got hurt.
But he's kind of like a little bit of a one-trick pony in that he's a very dynamic player and will make some incredible plays, but then every day, every shift plays, the little things you have to do, that's just not his game.
No, that's true. That is bearing out.
Let's shift from the sublime to the ridiculous, and the ridiculous is the Edmonton Oilers and Peter Chiarelli. This statement that came out today from Ryan Rishaug, TSN reporter Ryan Rishaug, Oilers organization is in a full court press to find help at forward. Scouts and staff deployed en masse.
Yep,
cap situation could make it tough, but a first-round pick, a goaltender, and maybe a young developing forward likely all in play. This organization is a cluster.
What has they been doing for the entire season? What do you mean? It's like an offensive and you're now going to go surround Iceland to intimidate the rest of the NHL? It's not a Navy. It's not like you deploy the 7th Fleet.
How much are we going to win in this bet from Eck? How much? I don't remember.
I can at least 4 cookies. 4.
Russ, they're making the playoffs, so don't even worry about it.
Give me
this is the kind of thing where a jersey needs to go back on the ice and Oilers fans need to stay away. They need to do civic unrest. I mean, if you can go bonkers for oil pipelines and stuff and drive trucks across Canada to protest our government, at least do something in your own backyard and fix your bloody hockey team, Alberta.
The one thing that's interesting, and our friend Ty Anderson pointed this out on Twitter earlier this morning when this tweet came out, is that Chiarelli in Boston in his last year when he was in trouble, like he's in trouble now in Edmonton, they put the handcuffs on him. They said, okay, you can make trades, but you can't trade future assets because, basically we don't trust you. Now, he didn't say that, but I'm saying it. In this instance, look at the deals that he's made so far. The Spooner-Strome deal, the Brandon Manning deal, by the way, who's been a healthy scratch for most of the time since he got traded. All these deals are like short-term for short-term or 1 year for 1 year. They're not – I would be shocked unless ownership –
10-1 at home.
Yeah, unless ownership is signed off on him trading a Puljujarvi or a first-round pick, I would seriously doubt they're going to let Chiarelli go out and make a deal that's going to have impact after this year, unless they're just so desperate to make the playoffs that they're going to risk their future.
But they're 3-7 in their last 10. They're 11-10-1 at home and 10-11-2 on the road.
And they lost to Arizona on Saturday, I believe. So, this, I'm sorry. The Hitchcock bubble is over with. And, they won, I think it was against Florida. And I think they had like 6 of the next 7 or 5 of the next 6 at home. And they won a game against Florida where they didn't lead the entire game until the shootout.
I mean, there's still a -18 on the year. You'd have think Hits would have, dug into that one, but no.
Yeah. And Ty Ratty is still a winger on their number 1 line.
Well, what else do they have, Mike? They've got nothing.
Here's their lines. Here's their lines. Draisaitl, who's playing the wing again, so that 8.5 or whatever you paid for him, you're paying for one of the highest paid wingers in the league, not a second line center. Draisaitl, McDavid, and Ratty. Lucic on the second line. And what has he got? 2 goals. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Alex Chason, Ryan Spooner, Brodziak, and Puljujarvi, Tobias Rieder, Jujar Kara, and Zach Kassian. Wow. For a team that's had so many high draft picks.
That's what happens when you trade Eberle and Holloway.
Here's the thing, though. I mean,
and Omar.
Yamamoto's got 8 points in 11 games with Bakersfield. Just bring him up and let him play longer than 12 games.
I don't get why Hitch isn't doing that. But like all the things you're saying about Edmonton,
I get why. It's because he plays a little bit like Patrick Sharp, except he's feistier, and Hitch sees that kind of player, and he doesn't want to deal with it.
The other thing is Hitch probably realizes half of these guys are broken because they're doing just that.
Right.
Like he might just be saving half these guys from the organization just out of the kindness of his heart. Rather,
no, Hitch won't do that. I'm sorry.
And by the way, Chris Russell's on the top defensive pairing.
Yeah.
Well, but Russell, I mean, people rip on Russell way too much. I mean.
Yeah, I wish they would stop.
But he's not a top pairing defenseman.
No, but Edmonton desperately needs another Chris Russell. Honestly, I mean, they really do. I mean, that's.
You know what they could do? They could get the forward version of him and trade for James Neal. Like he's not doing much in Calgary.
The James Neal thing is another story altogether. But but like all of this we're talking about, they are Hockey 500.
Oh my God,
21-21-3. No,
yeah,
but the only Edmonton. No, listen to me. Honestly, we mock Edmonton all the time, and they deserve to be mocked. They are playing terrible hockey, and for what they have, and for the talent they have, and for what they've got going on, and yet they are better than a lot of teams. They are 21-21-3. And they're 2 points out. You guys sit there and mock me for saying they're going to make the playoffs. They're 2 points out of the playoffs.
Oh, come on!
They have the best. They have the best player in the NHL,
and they play at all better. What I'm saying, guys, is this. I mean, we're sitting there and talking about
other than McDavid. There's not much there. That's the point.
McDavid, Draisaitl, Nugent-Hopkins, Nurse, and Larson.
And that's it.
That's it.
21.
Nothing else to show for it.
Let's go through the immediate games here. Next game's against the Sabres, who are really down and out and ticked off. That's a dangerous game. Next game after that's the Canucks, who right now are a better team than the Edmonton Oilers. Next game is the Flames, who's one of the best teams in the league. Next game is the Hurricanes, who are hotter than most teams in the Pacific. Who exactly are they beating?
Yeah.
0-5. Could be 0-5.
Flames right now are the best team in the West, and it's not even a contest. They are playing deadly hockey. Deadly.
All right, but you think
in the Hart conversation?
The Flames are being totally overlooked, and
Eck, your point, and I get it because you've staked.
Even if I wasn't staking it.
No. I'm just saying you said that Edmonton's gonna make the playoffs, and I understand. And I if you make a prediction, you want to stick with it, and I get it. But saying that they're 2 points out of a playoff spot in the Western Conference when Arizona, without almost everybody who's good on their roster, healthy, is 4 points.
Right.
The complete disaster that is the Chicago Blackhawks. They're within, I think, 6 points. So saying that you're 2 points out of a playoff spot when everybody else is like within like 5 or 6 points of each other is not a great statement.
No, this team. Yes, I get what you're saying, Mike. But the fact that they're that close together, that when you look at the difference between, I'm looking at it right now, Colorado
coverage just to be on the show. I really do.
Colorado is at 48 points, right?
Yeah, and they've lost 9 of their last 10.
Right, they're in a wild card spot. Minnesota's at 47, Anaheim 47, Vancouver 47, Edmonton 45. I mean, it's like
and Minnesota doesn't even have Dumba.
So get this. You have one team that's lost 9 of the last 10. You have another team that's lost 10 games in a row, and they're both ahead of Edmonton.
That's my point. My point is they're ahead of Edmonton by a few points, and we're sitting there and saying we're talking about.
Well, let's forget about the points. Let's just talk reality. Out of those games I just gave you, who are they beating?
Maybe Buffalo.
No, they could beat Buffalo. They could beat Vancouver. Vancouver's 21-5. They're 21-5.
Lately, they're a much better team, Eck.
I know, but this is the thing with Edmonton. They can turn things around. They have the ability to be a much better team than that as well. So at any point now, if they win like 3 or 4 games in a row, they're in the playoffs. It's just like
with Connor McDavid, Eck.
Yeah,
the Edmonton Oilers have only scored 126 goals. That's awful.
Oh, I know. Like, he's responsible for 57% of their goals. As far as he's had points on 57% of their goals, which is crazy, you know. I mean, and that there's never been a player anywhere close to that percentage. No, and that is my point. Is that, like, you know, all these things we're saying about how terrible they are. I mean, there's a lot of teams that used to would trade places with them in a heartbeat. You know,
everybody wants Connor McDavid.
No, but to be 2 points out of the playoff spot is what I'm saying. They would trade places. Cam Talbot gets a little bit hot. All right, you know, which is possible.
I want to read this to you though. I want to have an intervention. Here's the intervention. So the Canucks have a 33% chance of making the playoffs. The Oilers a 23% chance.
Oh, I hate that freaking website with a passion. Okay. That percentage of chance of making the playoffs. The Flyers last year had a 13% chance of making the playoffs and made them.
And a lot of things had to happen for them to make it. You know what the Flyers' chances this year? 0.01.
Right, and I know, and that is actually legit because they are horribly out of the playoffs. But the reality is, when you're 2 points out of the playoffs, how can you have a 21% chance of making the playoffs?
Because everybody else is.
They look at the schedule. They look at strength of schedule.
A game. You played half a season.
But it's strength of schedule. It's all those other things.
Okay, let's
not strength of schedule. That's the interesting thing about that website. I've talked to the guy about it.
No. Which website do you think I'm using?
It's the what's it called? Oh crap.
You don't know which website I'm using.
No, I know the website.
No, you don't. I'm using Hockey Reference. I'm not using that other site.
Okay. So all right. So I don't know what Hockey Reference does, but the other site that is all into this percentages and things, and Hockey Reference, it sounds like they're in the same spot because
here's what they take into account. What's current, what's remaining, the best, the worst. They're taking into account what other teams that they're playing them are as well.
That's good. And you know what I'll do after the trade deadline is what I always do, which is do the whole thing of I do the projected final standings where I take all that into account. Plus I take into account the records of teams versus teams, which I think isn't often taken into account, that some teams play better against other teams. And that's a big thing that I take into account. So we'll see. But last year, it's crazy.
Let's just deconstruct this tweet for a second, and then we can move on. Okay, so a first-round pick, Edmonton's first-round pick, that could be probably top 10 pick, Russ, right now because everything is so close.
Right.
And if they don't make the playoffs, they could be giving up. I mean, every pick that's non-playoff is a lottery pick, but I'm saying if it's top 10, it's more than a 5% chance. So they're willing to risk that. A goaltender, okay. You're talking about a rental of Cam Talbot, or because right now it seems that Koskinen is the guy. This is the one I bristle at. Maybe a young developing forward likely in play. Okay, so that you're talking about the number one name there is Puljujarvi. Yeah, and
that's true. I think he might get traded, and I also think it's true that player development's not been great in Edmonton, and it's not all on the kid either.
It's not impossible that Puljujarvi still has an NHL career.
Oh yeah, I would bet that there's a better than 50-50 chance that if he goes someplace else, he could blossom.
Yeah.
Right.
He just needs to get out of that toxic situation, which it just continues to be toxic. And I think
what Mike means by toxic is there's so much pressure from the fans.
Exactly.
There's so much pressure in that market. It does wilt some players, and Peter knows about that too.
And the fact that Connor McDavid has continued to go forward and be as great as he's been with that kind of pressure is just a statement on how good he is.
Yeah.
You know what? If I'm a GM right now, if I'm someone should just call up Chiarelli and say, "Hey, what would you take for McDavid? You can't win with him," and see what he does.
I know.
Just to get something, like it would just be
William Nylander and what?
No, it would be fascinating. if he could trade McDavid, he wouldn't. But if he could trade Draisaitl, he might. But at the same time,
they won't let him. No, he doesn't even have the ability.
They won't let him. But
no, that's what I'm saying. Like he's not allowed to trade those players, and he wasn't allowed to bring a coach in for more than 1 year.
Right.
The challenge here is that Chiarelli's messed it up so much that Connor McDavid could be 29 by the time they start seeing some light on this.
No, this isn't all on Chiarelli either. What has Paul Coffey done as an advisor? What has Mark Messier done as an advisor? All these guys,
they shouldn't be there in the first place. You know what, Russ? If I went and hired all my high school buddies to be my business partners, I'd be in the same place Peter Chiarelli is too. Yeah. I don't necessarily think it's his fault, but it's not. He's the one who has to get them out of it. And how many advisors do you need? This isn't Vietnam.
Like he's an advisor too, isn't he?
Yeah.
No, they've got too many cooks in the kitchen. They always have. And you would think that somebody like Messier is the kind of guy that you would actually want in there because he's actually.
Go ahead, Russ.
Speaking of which,
go ahead.
The Flyers had 6 of their front office people at the Devils game. 6.
I know.
I've never seen so many people go to a game to evaluate a last place team.
They must have all been going to Hamilton after the game. I don't know. I couldn't figure out
work right now for people.
They must have had a Groupon for it.
Yeah,
right. No, I mean there's. I mean, I don't want to go too far down their rat hole, but there is definitely, they are the Flyers. I wrote last week, and I thank you guys so much for picking up the slack last week. My son was really not doing well, and I appreciate everybody out there giving me the well wishes and all that stuff. But thank you so much. He's doing a lot better this week. But last week I did write at one point that the Flyers were buyers, and I got a lot of heat about it. Of course, I'm sure you talked about it, but and the reality is I wasn't the only person, because after I said that, Bob McKenzie came on. I think it was someplace and said
on Toronto radio.
Yeah, said the same exact thing. That
to your defense, I mean, the thing was that McKenzie said it's like they're going to be sellers and buyers at the same time. More than likely, the buying may happen during the off season, but if there's the opportunity to get a player that he was basically saying they're looking for a goaltender to bridge to Carter Hart. They're looking for a top 4 defenseman that can help their young kids, and they're looking for a third line center. He says most of those guys, they probably would have to wait until the off season, because no team, unless it's another team outside the playoffs, is giving up a top 4D or a third line center.
Right.
And
Mike just said top 4D if you want to drink, even though it was not with the.
Yeah, no. We'll talk about Toronto and top 4D in a few minutes.
Oh, we'll get to that. I do think that there's a feeling among the Flyers organization that if you can get somebody like a Stone here, even though he's a rental type player, that they can, by getting him here ahead of time. The Flyers have always believed that if they can get somebody into town ahead of the free agency period, that you can give up. You're gonna have to give up a lot for him, probably, because other people are he's gonna be a big thing, and Ottawa also needs to get players back that can help right now. So maybe Gostisbehere goes. But it's a situation too where you can see that the Flyers wouldn't do something like Gostisbehere for Stone unless they got permission.
But I will tell you this: while we all think it's possible that Gostisbehere gets traded, right now the Flyers redid their power play. From what I understand, he will be at the point again, even though his shooting percentage is the lowest in his career. So I have to believe if they were really going to trade him, they would probably try something else right now rather than going back to the same old. No,
I think they would do that too. But I think that they really when they're buyers, like I was saying, I do think that they are looking at it in terms of, okay, we have a great thing here. Philly's a great town to play in. A lot of great young players. Somebody gets here, they realize it's not as bad as it looks from the outside, and and we can convince Stone to sign here long term.
But that's an awful risky proposition unless you're, if it's if it's a conditional draft pick, if it's like say a first if he signs.
Yeah.
Okay, one thing, but you're not getting Stone for a conditional first. You're talking about multiple players in a deal for a guy like Stone, even though he's a rental, because he's a difference maker. Teams that are contending who need one more scoring winger are going to be bidding up like crazy for Mark Stone. So that's why I'm saying it makes more sense for Philadelphia to say, okay, after the season, he's going to want to hit the market. We all the positive things you said about Philadelphia, they can say, oh, we got the money, we've got defense, we've got these guys, this and that, and this and that. Okay. But there's no risk of you trading like a Rubstov or a Frost or young prospects in your organization for the possibility of signing Stone ahead of everybody else. Just sign him on July 1.
Yeah.
What's
you're
the point?
Right. You're right. Who's interesting, and you mentioned Peter mentioned in our chat room there that Winnipeg was scouting the Phantoms, which I heard as well. And that's been something that has been pretty. But it's interesting because I talked to
a lot of teams scout the Flyers now because they know they are going to trade.
Oh yeah, but actually scouting the Phantoms, which and sometimes if a scout's obviously if you're from, I mean Winnipeg has their East Coast scouts and all that stuff as we know. But if they're sending somebody important out here, you're going to catch the Flyers and the Phantoms on back-to-back nights. It's a really easy thing to do.
Sure.
And you might as well, right? Because you get the other thing. But I have heard Robert Hagg's name mentioned with the Winnipeg Jets quite a few times the last couple of days. As a defenseman.
He's a left shot, right?
He's a left shot. But he is way better than people realize.
Sure, but what do you think his value is? It's not like he has tremendous value.
He has tremendous value, but what he brings to Winnipeg, in terms of what he really is great at is hitting. Like he's a really really good hitter.
Well, I'll give you a deal that I think Winnipeg would do, and it would be up the alley of the Flyers where they want to go. How about Brendan Lemieux for Robert Hogg?
No, they can't make that trade. That is so idiotic. Will you stop it?
Flyers that.
Well, he plays the Flyers' way.
Yeah.
Shut up, Pete.
The most interesting thing, obviously, and they would never get this guy, but the second
you got where I was going there, Peter.
I know. The second was removed. One of my friends in Winnipeg said, "Well, you guys can finally get Bufflin now." Like that was the whole issue.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, right.
Which is never going to happen, but there was a time when that could have happened, and it was Hextall that was the one, like among all the Flyers people that didn't want Bufflin here. So,
well.
But here's the thing: if you're trading Robert Hagg, Winnipeg's not giving you a major player in return.
Yeah.
You're not looking at a major player there, but you're looking at a situation where the Flyers are going to say, okay, they're going to get a piece for something else. I mean, obviously the Flyers are looking to hit a home run right now, but that's not going to happen.
Right.
So they've got to pick up pieces, and they've got to have, you've got to hope that Fletcher has a plan to put little pieces together.
Okay, so here's the trade I think Winnipeg would make, right? Mm-hmm. So it would be like Robert Hagg for Brian Little. And maybe you'll get a draft pick out of it too because you're taking on some salary. Is that really what the Flyers want to do?
No, because Little's making what, 5.5, Peter? I mean,
that's why they'll get a draft pick.
Yeah, I mean he'd be the third line center that that would work. Russ, I know you got to go, but let me just ask you because we're talking about scouts in Philadelphia. I'm continuing to believe that there might be something between the Leafs and the Flyers, and you've noticed, and other people have tweeted it out, that Rick Olczyk, which is Eddie Olczyk's brother, who was a pro scout for the Leafs, has been a regular presence.
Yeah, he wasn't there last game, but he's been pretty much a regular. I think it's between Leafs, Flyers, or Leafs and the Hurricanes. That's what I think. That's my belief.
No,
but the thing is,
because he was with the Hurricanes, remember, and he was with the Hurricanes right before he was with Toronto.
Right, he was under Ron. He was an assistant GM under Ron Francis.
And was legendarily part of those horrible trades that brought Chicago, that brought players to Chicago to Carolina from Chicago. Was right. They ran him out of town.
Right, but he's just a pro scout. He's an evaluator right now. So that's
right.
But no. The thing is though, Carolina right now is still within striking distance. I think they're 4 points or 5 points out of a playoff spot. So I know that you mentioned Dougie Hamilton, and it's been mentioned by
they probably have a 6% chance of making it. You're saying, Mike?
No, hold on. I'll tell you what Carolina's chances are.
I would say it's probably in the 20% range. while Russ looks it up. But
Got it.
but that now they're looking for a scoring forward, and they're apparently hanging Dougie Hamilton out there as the carrot.
They are.
But the problem is, and I know that you mentioned Montreal, and that would fit because Montreal's looking to generate offense, and he's an offensive defenseman.
Yep.
He's not the type of defenseman the Leafs are looking for.
No, the Leafs won't give up very much for him at all, is what I was told.
Right. They would give up something significant for Pesci. They would give up something significant for a Slavin. They would not give up something significant for Hamilton.
Why?
Because
exactly right.
Because Hamilton is just more of what they already have. They already have enough defensemen who can't play defense.
He's a right-handed big defenseman.
Carolina.
What other big defenseman do they have?
He can't play defense.
He's not that bad.
Carolina has a better chance than Edmonton right now. It's 30.3%.
Yeah, Russ, is Dougie Hamilton an adequate defender, or is he below average defender?
No, I think he's right at the line. There's games where he's adequate and there's games where he's below, but I think for the most part he's adequate.
But he's a really good first outlet pass, and you get
he has an excellent first pass.
Like Toronto.
The best defensemen are the ones that get the puck out of your zone the fastest.
Yeah.
So is Jake Gardiner in terms of outlet pass, but it doesn't stop him from costing Toronto games.
Well, every defenseman's going to make mistakes, especially when you got that those group of forwards who don't play any back at all either. So I mean, you got that going on too up there in Toronto. I mean, that doesn't get enough credit. The fact that there's very few. There's a lot of guys who don't play any defense.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that because they played Boston for the final time on Saturday and they lost 3-2. I was at the game, and the two goals, the tying goal and the game winner late in the second period, both goals. The Gardner Zaitsev pairing were out there, and the Kadri Marlowe Nylander line was out there, and in both instances there were turnovers by the defenseman, and Nylander was caught below the goal line doing nothing. And Babcock didn't mention him by name, but mentioned the fact that you had somebody below the goal line, or really not taking a player out positionally, and that is a problem. You can't outscore. When they can't outscore their mistakes, they're in trouble. And that's why I continue to say they need that top four defenseman. And if they don't get it, they're not beating. I don't think they're beating Boston. But Boston is too good.
Hamilton is a top four defenseman. He is.
Yeah, but I don't.
He's good enough defensively that he's better than most of the guys you have.
Right, but
way better than almost anybody.
What I'm saying is what it would cost, because they're okay. I think Carolina, if you put together a Leaf Carolina deal, they would want Kapanen and probably a number one pick or something significant on top of Kapanen, and the Leafs are not interested in trading Kapanen, because I personally believe they're keeping Kapanen because they're going to trade Nylander in the offseason. That's my personal belief. I don't know. There's no guarantee.
I think you're probably right about that, but I think Kapanen's passed them on the depth chart for sure, and I think that and Kapanen actually is one of the few two-way forwards they have.
Right.
Do solid, he can do everything. But
right, and he's not going to, I know that a lot of people are talking about Kapanen getting a big payday, but he's had one good year this year. He had 7 goals last year. It's not going to cost him $5 million to re-sign Kasperi Kapanen. And if anything, it's going to be a bridge deal in probably the $2.5 to $3 million range. So if it's that, you don't give him up.
But what if it's Nylander?
For Dougie Hamilton?
Yeah.
I don't think. No, I don't think they would do. First,
why wouldn't they do that?
If it's the Leafs, apparently, I have heard that Nylander was offered to Carolina, and that Carolina just didn't want to pay him. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. Based on the statements that Dundon has made, where he's looking for a scorer, either he doesn't think that Nylander is a scorer, and I seriously doubt that, or he just is too fiscally restrained and doesn't want to pay for what a scoring forward is normally gets paid. So I don't know.
I think it's natural, right? I think what you're hearing with Dundon, you definitely hear a ton of that's like the company line on him, right? So it's easy to sit there and say he's not going to want to pay Nylander because that's what people say, but I haven't heard that myself.
Well, I honestly
like Nylander quite a bit, actually.
I honestly think that the target for the Leafs, and the question is whether they'll trade him or not, is Pietrangelo. That is the impact defenseman that they need. I think they would pay the price to get Pietrangelo, but I don't know whether St. Louis is going to trade him or not.
Yeah.
We talked to Kevin last week.
Yeah.
And he said he thinks he's fairly confident that the Leafs will get a top 4 defenseman before the deadline. It's just a question of if it's a top pairing or top 4, how much term he has left on the deal. They don't want to give up young assets for a guy who's a rental. They want somebody who's going to be there for a year or more after this year. And that means it's going to cost. I think they're willing to pay that cost. It's just a question of how good of a defenseman they can get.
Yeah. I want to get Peter's opinion on this, and I know Russ would agree with me 100% on this one, so I'm just going to. But on the Bobrovsky thing that I wrote today, which was a fun thing we got into a little bit on our own little chat. So basically, Bobrovsky. Things are not, he's saying all the right things, of course. Mm-hmm. Bob's not a bad guy at all. He's a pretty classy guy. He is actually, and it's this whole thing that he's got a bad attitude and is getting it's a little bit overblown from what I've been told. But at the same time, I really do get the sense that there's a comfort in Columbus, with trading him, which is really surprising in a lot of ways, because you would think that this is their shot. They're going to go with it. They're going to have Panarin and Bobrovsky, and they're a good enough team to make a run. They're as good as anybody they could be this year's Washington Capitals or whatever. They could easily come out of the East. But the problem with trading Bobrovsky is he's had a no movement clause, so he's really restricting them to where he's going to go. I've heard he only wants to go to the East. This is not like from anyone in Columbus, but it's just from other people out there. But I have heard a lot of information on him, and that sounds like Toronto is a place that he would go to. And bringing this up today, I know Anderson's back tonight, but it's sometimes hard, I think, to see like the Leafs, like who were down to Hutchinson, for a while there. Where this is a Stanley Cup contender, with Hutchinson in goal, and I can't help but think that with all of Anderson's injuries, that if you can get Bobrovsky, because they have the cap space to pull it off as a rental. As like your insurance policy, even if he's not your starter, but you have him if Anderson goes cold, or if Anderson gets hurt, which is either of which are incredibly possible. I mean, they would have pulled Anderson a couple times last year out of the playoffs, if I remember right, if they had Bobrovsky behind him. And yet, Mike, you seem to think that that's absolutely impossible. Before I say anything, Peter, what are your thoughts on that?
If I'm Kyle Dubas, and I think about what's going on with the contracts I have now, the money I'm going to have to spend later, and the cap room I have and assets. Mm-hmm. If I can find a way to get just some shoring up in defense, and you could find a way to, because I actually don't think there's going to be many suitors for Bobrovsky at the trade deadline. I just don't think it doesn't make sense. Remember, and you go. You go all the way back to the last remember when it was between Halak and Price, and there was talk that the Habs should trade Price and keep Halak. Yep. You know what they got for Halak at the deadline? A second.
Yep, exactly.
That's all they got. So, Bobrovsky's not going to cost a ton.
I think it was
add him in. The problem is, go ahead, Mike.
I think it was a second on Lars Eller.
Oh, maybe it was Lars Eller too. Okay.
And Lars Eller, has been a pretty decent player.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for correcting that. But if you could get Bobrovsky to go in, the problem is if you're Bobrovsky and you go to a contender, you want to be playing. Well, the only way you're playing is if Freddie Anderson basically loses a leg.
Exactly.
And so it creates a different problem. I love the idea. If your 1-2 is Anderson and Bobrovsky, Leafs fans they're going to start planning the parade route.
Yeah, and I don't think so.
But I don't think it makes sense because you want to be playing.
I don't think
with Anderson. I think that, and I'll let you talk about this, Mike, for sure. But with Anderson, you don't know what his health is going to be like. He's proven that they're playing him way too much. They can't. I think that home ice advantage against Boston is important. But I think that they need to make a way to make that happen. It might not be at the end of the day, but I think that they want to make that happen for sure. And
Well,
I just feel as if, that Bob might be better than Anderson. Like at the end, and I mean, we sit there and say Anderson is great and Anderson's been awesome and all this stuff. Bob's won 2 Vezina in the last 4 years. I mean, it's like,
and Bob has not won a playoff series, and Anderson got to a conference final with Anaheim. So that's the thing. It's like, okay, first of all, the Babcock and the Leaf organization, they love Frederik Anderson.
Yeah,
and
they do, and they will, and
they should.
They're not going to Bob as a UFA. I mean, it's not like Bob's coming in as UFA.
Well, and the only exception to this is if Anderson has not a long-term, a season-ending injury. Then I think Toronto would say, okay, let's, Jimmy Howard or Bobrovsky, we've got to patch this up. That gives us an opportunity to still have some success in the playoffs. That what Peter said is perfect. Bobrovsky is not going to sign off to be a 1B going into his free agent year, which means he's not going to play or will play, maybe 35% of the starts. Why would he do it? It's just, it makes, that's like Ben Bishop accepting a deal. What was it, Los Angeles? The only reason he did that was because the Quick's health was in question.
Right.
I
think that Anderson's health has to be in question. I mean, you can't sit there and say, he has been hurt so many times, and you were talking about a team that does not have anything behind him. Obviously, I like Sparks. They don't like Sparks, but I like Sparks. As you've said, before, Mike, they're not really big Garrett Sparks fans there.
Well, he's not trustworthy right now. He's a 25-year-old kid who's got 25 games of NHL experience. That's why the Hutchinson acquisition was a good one. And Hutchinson in 5 games played very well. Now, the reason they're not going to play him anymore right now is because he plays one more game. He has to clear waivers to go down to the American Hockey League. And then you basically threw a 5th-round pick in the garbage for nothing because somebody will claim him. So, but right now, face it. If Anderson gets hurt after the trade deadline, the Leafs season is over. It's done because he might be their MVP because look at how they play.
The way they play defensively, you're absolutely right. He's their MVP. Yeah. He's if not their MVP, he is going to be the difference maker if they go anywhere. Like he's going to have to be the guy who's going to have to stand on his head and play out of his mind, unless the Leafs defense suddenly gets better and matures and figures out stuff in the meantime, which is always possible too. They're young defense and they're getting better.
But unless they take Jarmo Kekalainen to the cleaners and get him for a 3rd-round pick or something like that, which is not going to happen. There's going to be some team out there that needs an upgrade in goal. Somebody like Colorado or Calgary if Riddick starts to come back down to earth. Unless they get him for a song, the Leafs are conserving their assets for defense and for again, depth of their lineup, even if forward, their top 3 lines are really good. Their 4th line played less than 10 minutes and, was barely noticeable. And they might be able to get away with improving, calling up some players from the Marlies who could help them 4th line. But there's going to be veteran guys, and Babcock is already starting to sort of press the button in press conferences where he says, I need heavier players. Well, he's telling Kyle Dubas, go out and get me some veterans.
Yeah,
that's what he's doing. And so I think defense and forward are the priority past the goaltending. Only if Anderson gets hurt again does a Bobrovsky or a Howard come back into the picture.
They have to get a better backup than Hutchinson. Hutchinson played well.
I think Hutchinson's a fine backup.
I honestly feel like he's too small to play in a series against Boston. Like just the way he plays, and you're gonna have a team that crashes. If you have a team that crashes the net like the Bruins do, you have to look at this like you're playing Boston, right? You're playing Boston, so you got to figure out what's gonna happen there. If Anderson was to go down with a season-ending injury next week, then would you give a 1st-round draft pick for Bobrovsky?
No way.
Why? Like, how would you not give it? You got to. Peter.
If Anderson goes down next week, you're probably trying to get Bobrovsky out. Like I would.
First.
Why would you not go first for your goalie? Otherwise, you're just throwing the playoffs away.
Mike, the Leafs first has to be in play for something.
Yeah.
Yes, it's in play for a defenseman. It's not in play for a goal.
If you don't have a goal,
I think they could do something for Columbus that's more valuable than a first, actually, for Columbus than just getting a first. Particularly one that if you get Bobrovsky, lights it up, you're maybe picking 30th or 31st.
Yeah, no,
in an ideal world. So considering what's on the Marlies and then the Leaf system, I think you get more that a better that can help down the way.
See, I don't know what
it would have to be a first and something else to get Bobrovsky out of Columbus.
Right, and that I'm telling you that
it wouldn't be something great. The first would be the biggest thing in the deal.
It could be a bunch of things. I mean, I don't think it has to be a first. I think it could be other things. The point being is Bobrovsky has control. He'd have to want to go there, and they'd have to. The other thing is.
And that would be a situation where he would waive if he was the guaranteed starter.
Mm-hmm.
But
you'd have to know too, like, is Anderson done till May? Because if he's done till May, then yes. But if he's done till maybe beginning of April, second week of April, that complicates it even worse.
No,
like if Freddie Anderson goes down, you need him basically in a wheelchair till June.
No, you don't want a goalie coming back the last day of the season.
Yeah,
go up against the Boston.
Right, like that. It's a horrible thing to say.
You don't want you can't. I mean, if there's any risk, if he doesn't come back and if he doesn't play well right now, or because of the injury or whatever, or if the injury reoccurs, or if anything happens like that, they have to be looking this direction.
That is my point, Ack. The thing is, right now, even if you believe that Bobrovsky is an upgrade over Anderson, let's just for argument's sake that it's a wash. They're both really good goaltenders.
Yeah,
okay, so. The Leafs are underdogs against the Bruins right now. The Leafs
barely
no, not barely. They got clean. They got their clock cleaned in 2 games in Boston. you can't base everything on the regular season, but they lost one-sided losses in both games in Boston. And and on Saturday, they got beat because a third liner in Sean Corrali had a goal and 2 assists, and the Leafs couldn't manage. Got stoned by Tuukka Rask and lost the game because of defensive miscues. I think Boston is definitely would be favored in a series if the season ended today with Anderson or Bobrovsky as a goaltender. The Leafs cannot win that series unless they upgrade their defense. The defense is the biggest priority.
Well, it's not the big. I mean, if you don't have Anderson, goalie immediately becomes your biggest priority. Okay, there's no 2 ways about that. Like you don't have a prayer.
But there are too many.
If you have Anderson, I think. Look, there's no doubt in my mind that the best thing to happen to the Leafs right now, from a perspective of how Kyle Dubas has to go into the trade deadline, is seeing Anderson get injured, what he has now, and realizing where he's got to short thing up. That's a silver lining in the cloud.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see the Leafs come in and be active on about 3 different fronts.
Yeah.
In different ways. 2 in acquisitions, and 1 in what they give up. It's not just going to be here's a first and some guy and blah, blah, blah. It's going to be serious assets and trades going on here. They are not going to take this opportunity, which arguably is their best chance since 1993.
Yeah.
To make the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
And squander it because of conservative nature of, well, the franchise needs to compete for the next 20 years. They don't need to make any more money and hold on and stuff. They need to go all in, even if it's been a rapid resurgence of the last 2 years and things going well. They have the talent, the right age gap to continue competing with their roster as it is now. They need to fix the holes and take a run while everything's cheap.
I agree with that,
but I expect Kyle Dubas to do nothing less than that.
I agree
he's going to be aggressive,
and
there's probably going to be some guys or some fans are going to go, no, I wish we didn't hold. I wish we could have held on to him. But if you want this team to go all in, and if they have to plan on beating the Bruins, and if they beat the Bruins, they're going to have to go up against the Lightning.
Yeah,
you need more.
Yeah, and Lightning aren't gonna you look at,
and it's not just goalie.
Yeah. Right, it's not just goalie, but you look at the Leafs. They have to, even if Anderson is healthy, they still need to go out and try to get Howard, because they still need. because Howard's not going to be that expensive, and you can get him.
Well, no, but Detroit is saying they want a first-round pick for him.
Yeah, unless a team is absolutely desperate. But I don't think there's not that many teams are going to be absolutely desperate. It would require some team like I can't even think like as a last year going down or something like that.
Kevin last week said that in a trade for Howard, the Red Wings would be looking for a young goaltender, and that's why I put together Calgary, because they have Gillies and they have Tyler Parsons. I mean, it could be Sparks if they wanted a veteran if they wanted Howard to come in as a veteran number 2 to back up it. But I honestly think, to Peter's point, they have holes. At a certain point, if Anderson goes down, you have too many holes that you have to fill. You cannot trade all these assets to fill the goaltending hole, the defensive hole, the forward hole. At a certain point, you say, okay, we're just going to go as is and hope for the best. Because if we trade away all these young assets, you need these guys to come through the organization. You're going to have guys who are making tons of money next year, and Marner and Matthews. They just signed a kid like Trevor Moore for less than $800,000 on a 2-year deal. Trevor Moore is going to make the Leafs next year because he's a cheap, inexpensive player.
Smart on Leafs' part, smart on Trevor Moore's part, smart all around. And I agree. And listen, I don't want to make this too Leaf-centric. I just think that, which I'm sure I've already failed at, but I'm just saying that this is, this is such an interesting thing because, and this goes back to the old, Pekka Rinne backup goalie thing that you guys know me, I'm well enough to know that I always support having a backup in the playoffs that you can go to, because it's just too vital, right? And when the Leafs, the Lightning and the Bruins aren't going, their window is opening like the Leafs windows opening. It's not like both of those windows are closing right now. They're all opening kind of at the same speed. Okay, like you could say the Leafs are maybe a year behind both of them, but not that far. And you have
it's a nice luxury to have, but the thing is, it's like, Boston's got Rask and they got Halak. So if one of them goes down, they have somebody who's at least been a number 1 in the past. But most teams out there, I mean, if Vasilevsky goes down in the playoffs, Louis Domingue's their backup. Do you think they have a really good chance?
No,
I don't. Phoenix Copley is the backup in Washington. Do you think they have a good chance?
No, if you're talking, I agree with you completely. And teams are going to have this issue. But when you look at teams that win the Stanley Cup, they tend to have half-season backups on their team because they tend to, last year the Leafs had, the Capitals had Grubauer, right? And for years,
Vegas had Malcolm Subban. So
no, I know you can't always. Yes, it is a luxury, but when you're in a position where you have all the cap space that you have, and because I'm not talking about signing Bobrovsky long term in Toronto, I'm just saying that this is a rental situation, completely a rental situation.
Like if the price is right, I do it, but it comes with some other problems. That's the challenge.
I got to run, guys, but thank you so much, everybody. Sorry for bugging out quickly, but I got to go pick up the child. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you all tomorrow.